Este é um episódio muito especial em que o podcast Trivium se uniu ao Comitê Organizador Paroquial da Jornada Mundial da Juventude de Alverca na condução de uma entrevista ao autor católico americano George Weigel, numa sua visita a Portugal em maio de 2023. George Weigel é uma figura ímpar no mundo católico, nem que seja pelo facto de ser o autor do livro Testemunho de Esperança, que é nada mais nada menos que a biografia oficial do Papa São João Paulo II, entenda-se aquela que foi autorizada pelo próprio. Para além disso, tem uma vasta obra com alguns dos seus livros traduzidos para português, tais como O Cubo e a Catedral e Cartas a um Jovem Católico. O seu livro mais recente, intitulado To Sanctify the World, de 2022, fala sobre a importância e a relevância do Concílio Vaticano II. Só o facto de ter acompanhado de perto São João Paulo II faz de George Weigel uma pessoa muito interessante, mas a verdade é que é alguém com uma visão muito própria da vida da Igreja, plenamente alicerçado na fé católica. E foi por isso um privilégio para nós poder entrevistá-lo, e é com muita alegria que agora partilhamos esta conversa com os nossos ouvintes, agradecendo uma vez mais ao COP de Alverca e em particular ao nosso grande amigo Ricardo Formigo por ter tornado este momento possível. Esperamos que gostem.
Muito boa noite a todos, sejam bem-vindos a este evento conjunto organizado pelo podcast Trivium e também pelo COP aqui da Paróquia de Alverca, sobre o pontificado de João Paulo II e das Jornadas Mundiais da Juventude. Hoje estamos aqui na Paróquia de Alverca com um convidado muito especial, George Weigel, que eu vou pedir aqui ao Ricardo Formigo que o apresente brevemente, mas George Weigel é um dos mais relevantes intelectuais católicos vivos e o biógrafo também de São João Paulo II, que nos vem falar então destes temas, e passava, sem mais delongas, aqui a palavra ao Ricardo Formigo para fazer uma breve apresentação do professor.
Muito obrigado, Bernardo. Agradeço ao Bernardo por ter aceitado o convite para estar aqui com o podcast Trivium a gravar o que vamos dizer aqui, perguntar ao professor, ouvir também o seu testemunho em relação ao Papa João Paulo II e o que o podcast Trivium tem feito para a nossa comunidade é extremamente enriquecedor. Convido todos, caso não sigam, o podcast Trivium no YouTube. Há podcasts sobre muitos temas relevantes para a vida da Igreja, sobre jovens santos a caminho da Jornada Mundial da Juventude, e convido todos a ouvirem, conhecerem e a darem a conhecer. Então, eu agradeço muito a vinda do professor George Weigel aqui à nossa paróquia, que é uma honra que nos ultrapassa, é mesmo uma grande alegria tê-lo aqui. O professor George Weigel é um Senior Fellow do Ethics and Public Policy Center, é um teólogo católico e um dos principais intelectuais conhecidos nos Estados Unidos da América e no mundo. Dá aulas de estudos católicos na William e Simon University. De 1989 até 1996, o professor George Weigel foi presidente do Centro de Ética e Políticas Públicas, onde liderou um amplo programa ecuménico e interreligioso de pesquisa e publicação sobre questões de política externa e doméstica. Em Portugal, George Weigel é maioritariamente conhecido pela sua biografia do Papa João Paulo II, Testemunho de Esperança, publicada em 1999 pela Bertrand Editora, e que nos vai contar como é que chegou a escrevê-la. Há de ser um dos seus pontos hoje neste testemunho. Também é conhecido por outros livros que foram traduzidos para a nossa língua. A Verdade do Catolicismo, que é um livro que reúne respostas a 10 temas controversos no que diz respeito à fé, que foi publicado em 2001 também pela Bertrand Editora. O Cubo e a Catedral, publicado em 2005 pela Aleteia Editores. E Cartas a um Jovem Católico, publicado em 2012 pelas edições Tenácitas, que foi o livro que o professor acabou de apresentar em Lisboa. Nos Estados Unidos, conta com mais de 30 livros publicados, incluindo a segunda parte da biografia do Papa João Paulo II, The End and the Beginning, publicado em 2010. Mais recentemente, em 2017, publicou um livro de memórias das experiências que o levaram a trabalhar como biógrafo papal, Lessons in Hope, My Unexpected Life with St. John Paul II. Para além desta bibliografia extensa e prodigiosa, também escreve ensaios e artigos de opinião em jornais americanos, entre os quais destaco The Catholic World Report, que caso saibam inglês, recomendo que passem por lá também frequentemente. É convidado muitas vezes para falar na rádio, na televisão, para dar conferências, sobretudo sobre notícias sobre a atualidade da Igreja e sobre o que se passa no Vaticano. A sua coluna semanal tem o título The Catholic Difference, a diferença católica, e é distribuída em 85 jornais e revistas em 7 países. Recebeu um BA do St. Mary's Seminary and University em Baltimore, onde vive nos Estados Unidos, onde é originário, e um MA da University of St. Michael's College, em Toronto. Tem 19 doutoramentos honoris causa em áreas como a teologia, a filosofia e o direito. Recebeu a Cruz Papal Pro Ecclesia et Pontifice, a Medalha de Ouro Gloria Artis da Polónia e a Estrela de Diplomacia da Lituânia. É um homem extremamente viajado, sobretudo para dar a conhecer temas da fé. Conhece ao detalhe o pontificado do Papa João Paulo II e disso nos falará. E agradeço muito a sua vinda aqui e passo a palavra de novo ao Bernardo.
Okay, Dr. Weigel, so it is a great honor to have you with us tonight again, a great honor and actually quite a challenge to conduct this interview. Podcast Trivium is a place where we like to talk about how to live the good, the truth, the beauty, and how we may find those transcendentals in our daily lives. So welcome to our podcast, welcome to Portugal once again. Not sure if it is your first time here or not, the fourth already. Wow. So we are delighted to have you with us tonight. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So my idea was to structure this conversation a bit around the pontificate of John Paul II, the Church today, and also, of course, about the World Youth Day. Professor Weigel just told me, let me start by John Paul II. So please, Professor, talk us a bit about this great saint.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. If this parish produces many young people as energetic as Ricardo, then the new evangelization in Portugal is in very good hands here. Because you're anticipating World Youth Day, I want to begin with a story from about 8 years ago. It was July 4th, 2014, and I was invited to the 50th wedding anniversary celebration of some very dear friends of mine who were great friends of John Paul II from the time that they were teenagers. My son was with me. We were doing a book together on Krakow in preparation for World Youth Day 2016. So my son was invited along to this 50th wedding anniversary mass in Wawel Cathedral in Krakow, where then Archbishop Karol Wojtyła had married this couple 50 years before. So it was a lovely mass, and as we were standing outside the cathedral, there were maybe 60 or 70 now rather elderly people who had been part of John Paul II's original group of young people in the parish of St. Florian in Krakow in the late 1940s. And I looked at these people, many of whom I had gotten to know over the years, and I said to my son, you are looking at the beginning of World Youth Day. I mean, to see these now elderly people who had been Karol Wojtyła's first kids in his first parish was to meet the beginning of World Youth Day. Why is that? Because that young priest, working primarily with university students in communist-dominated Poland in 1948, would become the first pope in centuries whose primary pastoral experience as a priest was as a university chaplain and what we would call a youth minister. And he would freely say that those young men and women with whom he was working as a priest were forming him into one of the most dynamic priests of his era, as he was forming them into mature Christian disciples. It was a beautiful exchange of gifts. And these young men and women whom he first met in 1948, 1949, remained among his closest friends till the day he died. And if you look at film of John Paul II's funeral, you will find many of those same people whom I saw outside Wawel Cathedral on July 4th, 2014, sitting right behind the heads of state and the heads of government at John Paul II's funeral. That's how close they were to him. So when he came to the papacy, Karol Wojtyła had a very good idea of how young people want to live lives of heroic virtue. How young people want to aim high in life. And that confidence that the young people of the late 20th century had the same yearning, the same desire to do something great with their lives that he had encountered with these young people in a very difficult situation in Poland in the late 1940s, that was the inspiration for World Youth Day. When John Paul II floated the idea of an international youth festival built around the sacraments, catechetics, and the Pope, the officials with whom he discussed this in Rome basically said, in a more polite way than I am going to say it, "You are crazy. This is going to be a complete disaster. These young people just are not interested in the sacraments, the way of the cross, catechetics, even meeting with the Pope." But he was so confident that that earliest pastoral experience as a young priest had a universal meaning that he simply went ahead against this opposition, and we all know what the results have been. World Youth Day has become really an essential part of the rhythm of Catholic life throughout the world. And it's had extraordinary effects. Now, that brings me to a second point, briefly. And that involves the Pope coming to Fatima on May 13th, 1982, 2 years before the first World Youth Day in Rome. And why did he come on May 13th, 1982? Because that was 1 year to the day after he had been shot in St. Peter's Square, on the day of Our Lady of Fatima. And he wanted to come and on a pilgrimage of thanksgiving to express his gratitude for his life having been shared. And when he got off the plane in Lisbon, before they drove up to Fatima, there was a prepared text in which he responded to the public officials and the church officials who greeted him. But then he went off the text and said spontaneously, "In the designs of providence, there are no mere coincidences." And then he repeated that. In the designs of providence, there are no mere coincidences. Everyone else may have thought that it was a complete coincidence that he would be shot on the day of Our Lady of Fatima. He did not think that was a coincidence. He thought that was part of the providential plan of God for his life. And he thought that was true of every one of us, not just of him. In the designs of providence, there are no mere coincidences. What we perceive now as random, coincidental, happenstance is actually some facet of the divine plan for each of our lives that we just haven't gotten fixed in the frame yet. We haven't fit, it's like a piece of mosaic that we haven't fit into the picture yet. Some years after that, there was a famous Polish actor, he's still alive, named Jerzy Sztor, and he was in Rome to take part in a play. And the Pope heard about this and invited him to dinner. And, one old actor wanting to meet another. And the Pope says to Mr. Sztor over the dinner table, "Pan Jerzy, what are you playing in?" And Mr. Sztor says, "Your Holiness, I am playing in Forefathers' Eve." Now, if anyone here has heard of Forefathers' Eve, I will be very impressed. Forefathers' Eve is a play by a man named Adam Mickiewicz. It's probably the most significant drama in the history of Polish theater because it's such a powerful evocation of Polish national identity, to the point where when Poland was obliterated from the map between 1795 and 1918, in the parts of Poland that had been absorbed by Prussia and Russia, it was illegal to put on this play because people would go crazy and there would be riots and whatnot because of this powerful evocation of Polish national consciousness. So, Sztor says, "I'm playing in Forefathers' Eve." The Pope talks and talks about how important the play was in keeping alive the idea of Poland when the Polish state did not exist. Then he recites large parts of the play from memory, and then John Paul II calms down a bit and looks across the dinner table and says, "Pan Jerzy, what role do you take?" And Mr. Sztor looks across the table and says, "Your Holiness, I regret to report that I am Satan," who is a character in the play. You can laugh at that, okay? And the Pope thinks about that a minute and says, "Well, none of us gets to choose our roles, do we?" Now, how do these two things fit together? They fit together around the idea of vocation. There's a tendency in the church to think of the word vocation as applying to the priesthood or consecrated religious life, period. In fact, John Paul II would insist, each of us has a vocation. each of us is an idea, if you will, in the mind of God, and the task of growing into Christian maturity is the task of discerning what that vocation is and then following it. And understanding that in the designs of providence there are no mere coincidences, and that these what seem to be coincidences can actually be pointing toward a vocation. And in the book that Ricardo mentioned, Lessons in Hope, My Unexpected Life with John Paul II, the first third of the book is describing things that happened to me beginning when I was 8 years old and continuing for some 30 years afterwards, that as I look back were preparing me to write the biography of John Paul II, preparing me for this curious vocation that I discerned. What does that have to do with World Youth Day? Simply this. If the World Youth Day here in Lisbon in 2023 has the profound effect that it has had in other parts of the world church, it will be a great moment of vocational clarification, or at least the beginning of vocational clarification for young people. That intense experience of being part of a global Catholic community has helped many, many millions of young people throughout the world begin a serious process of vocational reflection that can lead to marriage in the family, that can lead to all sorts of vocations in the world, or that can lead to consecrated religious life, or can lead to the priesthood. And so, as you prepare to celebrate World Youth Day here in Portugal in 2013, pray that that process of vocational discernment actually takes place here. And think about how providential it was that a young priest, fresh from doctoral studies in Rome, is told to go and create a campus ministry in communist-dominated Poland where organized Catholic activities were forbidden. And out of the friendships that were formed then, what you're about to experience in August began.
No, that was great, and I mean we have so much to think about that. I really don't know how to continue, but I wanted to understand your opinion regarding. I think we already more or less understood what you see was the vision or the purpose for John Paul II for the World Youth Day. So that was a first question. What do you think? If you can give us an explanation. And the second question is if you think that goal was achieved. And actually, I would also like to question how do you think the evolution of this project, starting in John Paul II, and the miracle it was, because as you so rightly said, no one believed that it would work, but during John Paul II's pontificate, and actually also during Benedict's and Francis' pontificates.
Well, let me tell you a story from World Youth Day in Paris in 1997. I was in Paris for all of that. I was staying with a lay friend who had been a student of Cardinal Lustiger, the Archbishop of Paris, and had then worked with Cardinal Lustiger for 20 years. And this man, whose name was Jean Duchesne, had helped prepare many of the texts for World Youth Day 1997. So I was really inside the apparatus, if you will. And it was an extraordinary success. No one expected the numbers that eventually came. There was extraordinary fervor shown by these young people. When you have 500,000 young people making the way of the cross through downtown Paris on a Friday evening in August, this is making an impression. You know, as it did in Toronto in 2002. Again, 500,000 young people walking through the middle of the city. So when this was all over, my friend and his wife and I went to their country home in Normandy to just relax for a few days after this intense experience. And we turned on the French evening news. And there is Cardinal Lustiger being interviewed by this completely befuddled television news person who has no idea. I mean, he cannot figure out what is going on here. You know, 1 million young people at Mass, 500,000 walking through the streets. And Cardinal Lustiger, who was a great man and I believe a saint, was in a very feisty mood. Mm-hmm. And he said, look, your generation abandoned the faith of your fathers. These young people have discovered Jesus Christ and want to explore all that means. Don't you impose your prejudices on them. At which point we opened another bottle of champagne. So, you know, this is experienced in different ways in different venues, but I don't know of a World Youth Day that has not produced some forms of new pastoral initiatives. That was certainly true of Denver in the United States in 1993. Everything from a new online Catholic university to new religious communities to a real transformation of the mindset of the American bishops. You know, hey, we don't have to be on defense here. We can be on offense evangelically. You just don't know what's going to happen. That's the Holy Spirit. But something good is going to happen because of this and because of the work that all of you will do in preparing for this. And just, you know, be open to the surprises would be my advice. Something surprising will happen.
Professor, recently we celebrated the 16th anniversary of the Council. And I believe you published a book recently regarding the council. So I would like to ask you if the World Youth Day and initiatives like that, if you believe that those are part of what the real spirit of the council is or should be. And also, linked to that question, one of the most recurrent topics in your letters is the apprehension regarding liberal Catholicism or late Catholicism in line with the teachings of St. John Henry Newman. How might the World Youth Day and similar initiatives help us to live better our faith? How can we better understand those apparently simple truths, but not as simple as that to enter in our hearts, that we did not invent God invented us, or that obedience to Christian truth, and I'm quoting here, is liberating in the deepest sense of human liberation.
A month before Vatican II opened, in a major radio address he gave on September 11th, 1962, Pope John XXIII said, "The purpose of the Council is evangelization." He had hoped that the Church would experience a new Pentecost through Vatican II, and that out of that Pentecost would come the kind of missionary or evangelical energy that came out of the first Christian Pentecost that we read about in the 3rd chapter of the Acts of the Apostles. That is beginning to happen in many ways. One of them is World Youth Day. So if John Paul II is a fruit of the Second Vatican Council, and it really is impossible to imagine John Paul II without Vatican II. I mean, not only the idea of a Polish pope, but someone who had shaped these documents, who had helped shape the Christ-centeredness, the Christocentricity of the Council. All of that is unimaginable without Vatican II. And of course, World Youth Day is not easy to imagine without John Paul II. So there's a bit of a syllogism here. One of the most important things about World Youth Day, I think, is that it demonstrates to young people, and actually to all of us, we are not alone. We are not alone. We may feel alone in secular societies in the West. We may feel under pressure, but we're really not alone. There are a lot of us out there. There are 1.3 billion Catholics in the world. Now, they're not all coming here in August, which is just as well, or Portugal would sink into the Atlantic with 1.3 billion people. We don't want that to happen. But we're not alone. The other theme from John Paul II that has been so important for World Youth Days, and that I hope is raised at this one, is the challenge that John Paul II put before young people. And he did this in many, many, many variations on one great theme. And the theme was, the challenge was, don't ever settle for anything less than the spiritual and moral greatness that the grace of God makes possible in your life. Don't ever settle for less than that. Now, you're going to fail. We all do. But that's no reason to lower the expectation. Get up, dust yourself off, seek forgiveness and reconciliation, but don't lower the bar. Keep striving to cooperate with grace, to be the great soul that you are called to be. Don't ever settle for anything less than that. That was a very powerful challenge, and was a very attractive challenge. So much of the world around us today wants to dumb us down, dumb us down. And John Paul II tried to lift us up. And that's very compelling. So I hope that challenge rings out in August here.
And how do you think we should do, firstly, to prepare ourselves to make the most of the World Youth Day, and particularly to receive the Pope, of course. Secondly, how can we live it well? Actually, a question that I also have, and I think it's important, is that how should it change our lives? Meaning, it surely will be a very compelling and a life-changing moment for all of us that will participate. But it should not be only a moment of fervent Catholicism. It should help us to bring our Catholicism to all aspects of our lives. That is also the message of the Council. How can we do that?
Well, I think Ricardo would like you to prepare for the Council by buying letters to a young Catholic. And hopefully the new edition will be available soon, and I'm sure he will make it available here in the parish.
Hope before the event, the World Youth
Well, it's
Day.
supposed to be next week, so if it's delayed 2 months after that, something's seriously wrong.
Welcome to Portugal, Professor.
Devote 15 minutes of prayer every day between now and August 1st to praying for the success of World Youth Day, for the deeper conversion of everyone who participates in it, for a profound sense of meeting the Lord through meeting his friends, his disciples. I think reading the Church reads the Acts of the Apostles during the Liturgy of the Hours every day between Easter and Pentecost. For those of you who don't pray the Liturgy of the Hours, spend some time reading those stories of the early church between now and August 1st. A lot of people are concerned about the state of the church today, the state of the church in the world today. And I often remind audiences in the United States that while there are libraries of books of church history, there is only one divinely inspired book of church history. That's called the Acts of the Apostles. How does it end? It ends with a shipwreck. And the shipwreck becomes the occasion to extend the mission to a place where the gospel had not been heard before. That's not just something that happened to St. Paul on his way to Rome at the end of the Acts of the Apostles. That is a metaphor, an image for the church at every moment in its history. What seems to be shipwreck, difficulty, storm, turbulence, boat is rocking, is really a call to extend the mission into new places. And that's what should happen in August. I hope everyone who participates in this will come out of the experience with a deeper sense that on the day of our baptism, each one of us was called to be a missionary. Mm-hmm. Each one of us was called to be a missionary disciple? We'll have an interesting little survey here. How many people, if you know the date of your baptism, raise your hand. That's good. That's about 5%. It's usually 3%. So this is obviously a lively parish. Everybody else, when you go home tonight, pull out the file where you keep the important Catholic paper and look up the date of your baptism and celebrate it. Because that's the day through your parents, through your godparents, through the priest or deacon who baptized you. That's the day you were given the Great Commission. Go and make disciples of all nations. That was not addressed to a few dozen people in Galilee 2,000 years ago. That was addressed to everybody in this hall tonight on the day of their baptism. So learn the date of your baptism and have a party. And then go out and be a missionary disciple.
That's funny because I know a priest here in Portugal that actually asks a lot of times. He's like John Paul II. He was for many years a chaplain at the Catholic University here in Lisbon, and many times he asks the young boys that are with him, do you know your birthday? Okay, fine, that's fine. And the day of your baptism, you don't know, but you should celebrate more the day of your baptism than your birthday. And you just remind me of that. We were talking about evangelization to be apostles, modern apostles. And I would like to ask you, what do you believe are the main challenges for youth, and not only for youth, for all of us as parents, as educators, as professionals, in today's cultural environment? Because I believe, and I think I already heard you talking about this in interviews or articles. Many times we are kind of, I don't know, a bit sad and say, church is everything is going bad with church. We have a big crisis, and you say church is not Europe, nor is only Rome. You need to have the big picture, and actually the church is growing a lot in a lot of places, not only Africa and Asia, but those kind of ministries that are growing all around the world and among the youth, among the universities. But in fact, in Europe, there is a crisis. And what are the challenge for us, and how can we have the courage, the fortitude to embrace those challenges as all the saints and as the apostles did in the Acts, as you just mentioned?
I think it's a question of confidence and compassion. Confidence that the gospel is true, that the church is the bearer not only of truths about God, although it surely is, but truths about us. This is one of the great themes of the pontificate of John Paul II. It's actually inscribed in the Second Vatican Council in paragraph 22 of the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World, where the Council Fathers write that it is only in the mystery of the Word made flesh, in Christ the new Adam, that the mystery of us and our noble destiny comes into focus. So when we put that in slightly different language, to meet Jesus Christ is to meet the truth about God, but it's also to meet the truth about us. And if we really believed that, then we would have the confidence to offer that to others. We would have the compassion to understand that that's a startling claim to people right now. But we'd have the compassionate patience to walk with people or accompany people, a word that Karol Wojtyła used in his pastoral ministry 70 years ago, before people started talking about accompaniment today. That was his theory of pastoral ministry. So I think it's a combination of confidence and compassion. That will equip us to meet the challenge of a world that's on the one hand hostile, but on the other hand is just bored.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But, the boredom we can turn to our advantage. There's nothing boring about Christianity. I mean, you might think it's crazy, you might think it's implausible, but it's not boring. Okay? It's not boring. To go through Holy Week liturgically with the church is to enter the central drama of human history. So, those are some thoughts on that.
No, that's great. Ricardo, do we have still time for some questions from the audience? What do you think? Okay, so I think we have some room here. So, who would like to take this unique opportunity to put a question to our professor? Quem é que gostaria de fazer uma pergunta? Se preferirem fazer em português, podemos traduzir também. Não sejam envergonhados, professor.
There's a non-shy person.
There is a non-shy person.
Nesta primeira pergunta foi pedido ao George Weigel para dizer como é que ele acha que devemos enfrentar os desafios da Igreja atuais e sobre como crescer na fé no pós-jornada.
Okay, are we going to be here till 4 o'clock in the morning? Let's talk about the after first. If World Youth Day has the effect I hope it has, then those of you who are participant in it will do at least 2 things in the years ahead. You will become much more biblically literate, and you will actually read the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. I suspect this is true here, but there are programs in the United States called the Bible in a year and the Catechism in a year. That's a very good idea. 15, 20 minutes, half an hour a day. That keeps feeding you so that you actually know what the church teaches instead of what the world misunderstands the church teaches. Mm-hmm. And you learn to look at the world through a biblical lens. And that's, as I said about the shipwreck story from Acts, that is very important. So those are 2 things that occur to me about, afterwards. And I can't remember what I was going to say to the first part of your question, but let me just say one thing about, all of this controversy about the church today in whatever arena that takes place. In preparing to write my book on Vatican II, the first third of which, 1/3, is explaining why the council was necessary. Mm-hmm. What is the civilizational crisis to which the council was responding. But in preparing to do that, I read the first volume of a 5-volume history of the Council of Trent in the 16th century by a very distinguished historian named Hubert Yadin. And the first volume is explaining why the Council of Trent was necessary. And if you think the church has problems today, read the first volume of Yadin's History of the Council of Trent. It will stand your hair on it. I mean, however difficult you think things are today, we don't have 3 people claiming to be pope. We don't have this massive entanglement of the church with political power. The corruptions of religious orders by money, ill-prepared priests who can barely read, much less have any theological formation. The church at the end of the 15th century was a big, fat mess. Far worse than today. And that's comforting. Because 100 years later, there was this tremendous explosion of Catholic faith and energy that, among other things, brought the faith to the Western Hemisphere. So learning a little history helps.
2 minutes. Okay. Is there any other question? Okay. Oh, now 2 minutes to questions.
Quick.
Great. We'll put the two questions
together.
Nesta pergunta, pediu-se ao George Weigel para dizer o que acha que São João Paulo II esperaria que os jovens encontrassem na Jornada Mundial da Juventude para fazer face às dificuldades da vida.
Yeah.
We want you to attach the other question.
Go back to the first public mass of John Paul II. Be not afraid. That was the first message to everybody, but especially to young people. If you have really formed a deep friendship with the Lord Jesus, or if you're seeking to form that, and you're in conversation with other people who are trying to form that, you're on the way to that vocational discernment that will help you understand what is this one thing, what is this unique thing that God has in mind for my life, which may take you in very unexpected directions, but will be a source of constant adventure. Secondly, I would say that John Paul II would say to you and every other person your age, never doubt your capacity for courage. Never doubt your capacity for goodness. Never doubt your capacity for virtue, even though we all struggle with courage and virtue and goodness. Don't doubt that the capacity for that is built into you, and that the grace of God working through the sacraments in your life can unleash that. And third, I think he would say, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You're not going to be able to bring others to Christ unless you have worked through a lot of hard questions on your own. So don't be afraid of the questions. Questions are a sign that you're growing in your faith.
Can we still have the last question?
Yeah, one.
Please.
Nesta pergunta, manifestou-se a preocupação em reduzir a jornada a um momento de veneração do Papa e perguntou-se como é que se pode não cair nesta tentação e aproveitar realmente e espiritualmente a jornada.
Yeah. Let me go back to what I said before. 15 minutes of prayer every day, that these months of preparation and then your participation in this will bring you closer to the Lord, will help you get a new sense of the beauty of the faith and your role as a missionary disciple. And whether you see the Pope from 500 yards away, or if he gets sick and isn't here, the Lord is here, and that's what's important. All of the circus aspects of a papal visit are they can be helpful, but that's not the whole thing. I mean, World Youth Day is about Jesus Christ. It's not about John Paul II or Benedict XVI or Pope Francis. It's about Jesus. And if you keep focused on him, then no matter who shows up, you'll have a good experience. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's lovely to meet you. I'm from a different cultural environment. I am not used to meetings at 10:30 at night. So I admire your grit and your longevity, and I'm going to bid you good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, so much. God bless you.
Thank you.
Professor, thank you very much for everything. We would like to offer you a Portuguese present, a gift from our parish that you can take to United States and remember this evening, which is tomorrow will be the birthday. Yes, the gift is very away, so I will talk a lot.
She will buy the gift now?
Tomorrow will be the 103rd anniversary of Pope John Paul II, and I believe that we can associate our 15 daily minutes of prayer for the World Youth Day, also asking for his intercession and asking for his guide of our life, because he always asked us not being afraid of the world, of nothing. Also, I remember when Our Lady appeared on Fatima, this was the first thing that she said to the shepherds: don't be afraid. And it's also the same thing that the angel said to Our Lady. So it's a regular in the church history. The fear, it's a condition that stops the grace. And so thank you very much for all that you share with us tonight, a few minutes ago, last night, these 2 days. It was wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Professor.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you all, and let's pray for each other in the months ahead, and I will watch with great interest what happens here in August.